Marcus Johnson tore his resignation letter in half, then pressed both pieces flat on the table and stared at them like they owed him an answer. 6 years of showing up early. 6 years of fixing everything they broke. 6 years of making himself small enough to disappear into the walls of a building that never once asked his name. And tonight, a billionaire CEO was standing outside his apartment door soaking wet, shaking with a secret that could burn the whole company to the ground. The man who spent 2 years running from her was about to become the only person she trusted. What city are you watching from? Drop it in the comments. I want to see how far this story travels. Subscribe and don't move. This is only the beginning. Derek Hollins dropped the folder on Marcus's workbench like it was trash. Not placed, not handed, dropped from a height with that particular wrist motion that said, "I didn't come here to be careful with your things." Rescheduled, Derek said. The Hayes presentation moved to Friday, which means your crew needs to have the entire fourth-floor HVAC system operational by Thursday night. Not Friday morning, Thursday night. Marcus looked at the folder, looked at Derek. The parts for the secondary unit aren't arriving until Friday morning. That's the vendor's confirmed delivery window. I sent that report to facilities 3 weeks ago. I don't care about your report. Then you also don't care that it's physically impossible. Derek smiled. It was the kind of smile that had nothing warm in it. Figure it out, Johnson. That's what we pay you for. He turned to leave, then stopped the pause, too deliberate to be casual. Oh, and try not to be wandering around the executive floor this week. We've got people up there who matter. He was gone before Marcus could respond. The two junior techs across the room, both younger, both watching, suddenly found the floor extremely interesting. Marcus stood still for exactly 4 seconds. Then he picked up the folder, walked to his locker, pulled out the yellow legal pad he used for tracking work orders, and wrote down every single detail of that conversation. Date, time, exact words. The way he had been doing quietly for 14 months. Not because he was planning anything. Because his grandfather had told him a black man in a white building doesn't get to rely on, he said, she said. Write it down. Date it. Keep it. He wrote it all down. Then he went back to work. Marcus Johnson was 36 years old and had been invisible by choice for most of his adult life. Not the invisible of a man who had given up. The invisible of a man who had done the math. He'd grown up in Cincinnati East Side, the part of the city that got mentioned in news stories, but not investment plans. His father worked 2 jobs and still died at 53, with nothing but debt and a reputation as a hard worker, which turned out not to be a currency you could spend on anything. His mother held the family together with a discipline that looked like coldness from the outside and felt like armor from the inside. His grandmother Lula was the one who talked to him, really talked, sat with him at the kitchen table and told him the truth about the world in a way that didn't crush him but also didn't lie to him. Marcus, she told him once when he was maybe 12. There are rooms in this country where you are going to walk in and every person in that room is going to make a decision about you before you open your mouth. And you can spend your whole life being angry about that, which is reasonable. Or you can decide that the one thing they cannot take from you is the quality of your work. Not both. You have to pick. He'd picked the work. Maui. He put himself through a trade certification program while stocking shelves overnight at a grocery store. He got his HVAC certification at 22. His electrical endorsement at 25. When the woman he loved, Ava's mother Danielle, told him at 28 that she hadn't signed up for a life this small and walked out, he didn't collapse. He didn't chase her. He stood in the doorway of a 1-bedroom apartment holding a 2-year-old girl who smelled like baby shampoo and made a decision. Everything I have goes to her. And then he sealed the rest of himself up and went back to work. He'd been at Pinnacle Tech for 2 years. Senior maintenance technician. He knew every pipe, every panel, every failing circuit in that building, the way a doctor knows a patient, not from a chart, but from actual time spent listening. He had a 97% first completion rate, which meant he fixed it right the first time, almost always. His crew respected him. Facilities management relied on him even when they didn't say so out loud. And he had spent 2 careful years making sure that no one on the executive floor knew his face well enough to attach a story to it. Especially not Victoria Hayes. She was impossible to avoid entirely. That was the problem. Pinnacle Tech wasn't a massive corporation, maybe 400 employees across 3 floors, and Victoria Hayes was the kind of CEO who actually walked the building. Not performatively. Not with a camera crew. She just appeared the way certain people do in the places where the actual work was happening. Marcus had watched her crouch next to a data analyst's desk and ask a question for 20 minutes. Watched her eat lunch in the break room on the 2nd floor like she hadn't noticed it wasn't the executive dining area. Watched her hold the elevator door for the cleaning staff and ask their names and remember them the next time she passed. It was that last part that got to Marcus the most. She remembered names, his included. The first time she'd said Mr. Johnson, not hey or maintenance, or the informal head nod that passed for acknowledgement with most of the people in suits up there, he'd actually looked behind himself to confirm she was talking to him. She was. The panel on 2 has been making a sound, she'd said. I don't know if it matters, but I wanted to make sure someone knew. I'll check it, he'd said. Thank you. That was it. 30 seconds. But she had said thank you like she meant it, and his name, like she'd always known it. And Marcus had walked away from that interaction with the particular discomfort of a man who has built a careful wall and felt it flex under unexpected weight. After that, he started taking the stairs more. 3 days after the Derek Hollins confrontation, Marcus was in the parking structure doing a routine check on the ventilation system when Ray called. Ray Dupree had been his best friend since they were 11 years old in Cincinnati, playing basketball in a lot that wasn't anyone's lot and belonging to a city that treated them like background. Ray now ran his own small contracting business and called Marcus every other day because, as he put it, someone has to make sure you haven't fully converted into a robot. How's Ava? Ray asked the way he always started. She told her stuffed elephant Gerald that he needs to work on his listening skills. Ray laughed hard. She's going to be a CEO herself one day. God help whoever works for her. How's the job? Marcus was quiet for a beat too long. Marcus. Hollins pulled another one today. Ray's voice shifted, the ease dropping out, replaced by something more alert. What kind? Impossible deadline. Physical parts aren't here, but somehow that's my problem. And then the parting shot about staying off the executive floor because people who matter are up there. Silence on the line. You wrote it down, Ray asked. Every word. Good. A pause. How many pages you got now? 14 months of pages. Another silence. Then Ray said carefully, Marcus, you know you don't have to stay there, right? I've told you I can bring you on. I'm not leaving Ava's school district again. I know. I'm just saying there are options. There's one option right now, Marcus said. Show up, do the work, keep Ava stable. Everything else is noise. Ray didn't argue. He knew better than to argue with that particular sentence because he'd heard it in variations for 6 years, and he understood what it meant. It meant, I have sealed myself into this choice, and I am not ready to examine the walls. What Ray said instead was, she asked about you, by the way. You're CEO. Marcus's hand stopped moving on the ventilation panel. What? My buddy Terrence works in IT up there. Said Hayes asked someone in facilities about the tech who handles the HVAC system. By name. Your name. Why? Terrence didn't know. But apparently Hollins found out she asked and wasn't happy about it. Marcus stared at the panel in front of him. That's nothing, he said. Maybe. It's definitely nothing. Okay, Marcus. He hung up and stood in the dim of the parking structure for a long moment, ventilation humming around him, and tried to determine why that particular piece of information had landed in his chest with the weight that it had. He told himself it was nothing. Yet, he told himself that 3 more times on the drive to pick up Ava from school, and twice more while she told him about her day in the back seat, with the full narrative detail of a child who believes every moment of her life is equally important and worth reporting. He almost believed himself by the time he got home. The call came at 9:47 p.m. on a Thursday. Ava was asleep. Marcus was at the kitchen table with the legal pad monthly budget, every number accounted for in pen the way grandmother Lula had shown him, and his phone buzzed with a number he didn't recognize. He almost let it go to voicemail. "Hello?" A pause. Then, "Mr. Johnson, this is Victoria Hayes." He sat up straight without deciding to. "I'm sorry to call this late," she said. "I got your number from HR. I should have asked first." "It's fine." He kept his voice even. "Is there something wrong at the building?" "No." Another pause, and something about the texture of it was different from her usual precision. Slower, more careful, like someone picking their way across uncertain ground. "I need to ask you something unusual, and if your answer is no, I completely understand." He waited. "I know where you live from your employee file. I was wondering if I could come by, tonight, for a short time." The kitchen was very quiet. Marcus looked at the legal pad. At Ava's drawing stuck to the refrigerator with a magnet, a house with a sun in every corner because she believed the sun should be everywhere at once. Every reasonable instinct he had said, say no. This is not your situation. You made a deal with yourself, and the deal does not include this. And underneath every reasonable instinct, something else, something older and harder to name, heard the specific quality of the silence between her words, and recognized it. He had heard that silence before, in his own voice at 28, standing in a doorway, holding Ava. The silence of someone at the absolute edge of what they can carry alone. "Give me 20 minutes, he said. She arrived in 18. The knock was soft, 3 taps careful, like she'd almost turned around twice on the way up. He opened the door and stood there for a moment in which neither of them said anything at all. And Victoria Hayes was soaked through. The spring rain had come hard and fast, and she'd had no umbrella. Her blazer, charcoal gray, the expensive kind, with the construction you could see from across a room, was dark with water. Her hair was flattened. Her mascara had tracked in 2 thin lines below her eyes that she hadn't bothered to fix. She was holding her car keys in both hands, like a woman who needed something to hold on to. And she was looking at him, not the way a CEO looks at an employee, not with authority or assessment or the practiced warmth of someone managing a dynamic, but with the raw, exposed expression of a person who has run out of other options and knows it. Marcus stepped back from the door. "Come in." She came in and stopped in the middle of the room and looked around, the way people do in unfamiliar places, absorbing it rather than evaluating it. The framed drawings on the wall. Ava's backpack hanging by the door. The legal pad on the kitchen table still open to the month's numbers. The small, particular order of a life that had been built piece by a man who could not afford for any piece to fall. "I don't do this," she said. Her voice was quiet, and she was talking as much to herself as to him. "I don't go to people's homes. I don't show up without a plan." "I know." She looked at him. "How?" "Because you have that look people get when they've surprised themselves." Something crossed her face, not quite a smile, but the shape where a smile might live. He went to the kitchen and came back with a towel, clean folded blue. Ava had picked them and handed it to her without ceremony. Then he put coffee on, because the night called for it, and sat across from her at the kitchen table and waited. She dried her face, set her keys down, looked at the legal pad. "You do your budget by hand," she said. "My grandmother's system." "Does it work?" "Every month for 6 years." She nodded, looking at the numbers she couldn't fully read from across the table. Then she looked at him. "Why do you avoid me?" The question hit the center of the room like something thrown hard. No preamble, no softening. Just the question, direct and undeflectable, from a woman who apparently had decided that she was done with the long way around. Marcus held her gaze. Because, he said, every time you treat me like a person, it reminds me of everything I've spent 6 years convincing myself I don't need. The rain tapped the window. The coffee maker made its sounds. Victoria Hayes sat across from a maintenance technician in a small apartment on a Thursday night and did not look away. "They're going to take the company," she said. Her voice was level, but it cost her something to keep it that way. He could see that. "People I hired. People I trusted. I found out 3 hours ago, and I can't—" She stopped, pressed her lips together. "I cannot go to the board without proof, and I cannot get proof without someone who has access to the building outside of business hours, and I cannot ask anyone in my executive team because I don't know how far it goes." She paused. "I need someone who has nothing to gain," she said. "Someone who's never once tried to use me for something. Someone who—" She exhaled slowly. "Someone who I've watched work for 2 years and never once seen cut a corner." Marcus was quiet for a moment. "You've been watching me work," he said. "I watch everyone work." "That's not an answer." "No," she said. "I suppose it isn't." He got up and poured the coffee, set a cup in front of her, sat back down. "Tell me what happened," he said. She told him. She started at the beginning 3 years ago. A partnership deal that didn't feel right, but that the board had wanted, and she'd approved against her gut. 2 executives who had been quietly building something on the side, using company infrastructure, company data, company relationships. A financial arrangement that was hidden well, but not hidden perfectly. A paper trail that existed in the building systems in server logs and access records and climate-controlled data storage on the 4th floor that no one on the executive team had thought to look at, because no one on the executive team spent time thinking about what happened in the walls of the building. But Marcus did. Marcus knew exactly what was in those walls. By the time the coffee was cold and the clock on the microwave read 1:23 a.m., and the rain had reduced itself to a quiet, steady murmur against the glass, Marcus Johnson had said very little and understood almost everything. He understood the shape of the betrayal. He understood where the evidence would be. He understood with a clarity that had nothing to do with arrogance and everything to do with 2 years of intimate knowledge of every system in that building, exactly what he could find and how to find it. He also understood something he hadn't expected to understand tonight. Victoria Hayes was not what he'd told himself she was. She wasn't the untouchable authority behind a title. She wasn't the symbol of a world he didn't belong to. She was a woman who had built something real, been betrayed by people she'd trusted, and driven across a city in the rain because she was out of safe places to go. And she'd ended up at his door. He thought about that. He thought about Ray saying sealed up like a room with no windows. He thought about his grandmother saying the one thing they cannot take from you is the quality of your work. He thought about Ava, asleep down the hall, who watched people and really saw them and asked the most remarkable questions. He thought about the resignation letter he'd torn in half and never thrown away. "I need 3 days," he said. Victoria looked up. "For what?" "To get you your proof." She was very still for a moment. Then, "Marcus." It was the first time she'd used his first name. They both noticed. "This is not part of your job," she said. "What I'm asking you to risk." "You didn't ask," he said. "I'm offering." "Why?" He looked at her for a long moment. At this woman who had remembered his name on the first day and looked at him like he existed and defended him to Derek Hollins and driven across the city in the rain to knock on his door. "Because he said you came here instead of sending someone." She didn't say anything. "And because whatever's happening in that building, those are 400 people's jobs. 400 families." He paused. "I know something about what it means to be responsible for the people who depend on you." The kitchen was quiet. Victoria Hayes looked at Marcus Johnson, and in the long silence that followed, something shifted between them, not dramatic, not declared, just a thing that moves quietly and without announcement, the way the most significant things tend to do. 3 days, she said. 3 days. She stood to leave, picked up her keys from the table. At the door, she stopped and turned back. "Mr. Johnson?" "Marcus?" She paused, then quietly, "Thank you, Marcus." He nodded once. He closed the door behind her and stood in his kitchen in the 1 a.m. silence of his apartment. His daughter breathing down the hall, the coffee cups still on the table, the rain still falling outside. And Marcus Johnson, the man who had spent 6 years building walls so nothing could reach him, stood there in the middle of his small, carefully ordered life, and understood, with the particular clarity that comes only in the middle of the night, when there's no noise left to hide behind, that something had already reached him. And for the first time in a very long time, he wasn't sure he wanted to stop it. Where are you watching from? Drop your city below. Subscribe, because in 3 days, what Marcus finds in those walls changes everything. Marcus did not sleep that night. He sat at the kitchen table after Victoria left and stared at the empty coffee cups and turned everything she'd told him over in his mind, the way he turned a faulty circuit over in his hands, looking for the place where the current broke, where the connection failed, where the damage had started long before anyone noticed the lights flickering. 3 names. That was what it came down to. 3 names that Victoria had said quietly, like saying them out loud, made the betrayal more real than she was ready for it to be. Derek Hollins, VP of Operations, Sandra Voss, Chief Financial Officer. And the one that had made Victoria's voice go flat, in a way that was worse than anger, James Whitfield, her co-founder. The man who had been there from the first day, who had sat across from her in a coffee shop 8 years ago and said, "I believe in what you're building," and meant it, or at least performed it well enough that she'd believed him for 8 years. Marcus wrote all 3 names on the legal pad. Then he wrote what Victoria had told him about the paper trail. Server access logs on the 4th floor. A climate-controlled storage room that housed backup data systems that Marcus had serviced twice in the last year, systems that very few people in the building had physical access to. Financial transfers routed through a subsidiary that had been created 18 months ago quietly, in a state filing that someone had clearly assumed no one would ever connect to Pinnacle Tech. He circled the storage room. Then he sat back in his chair and thought about Derek Hollins dropping that folder on his workbench. Try not to be wandering around the executive floor. And Victoria asking someone in facilities about the HVAC tech by name, and Hollins finding out and not being happy about it. Hollins had known Marcus was getting attention from Victoria, and Hollins had moved fast to create distance between them. Not because of any HR concern, because a maintenance technician with full building access who had the CEO's trust was a problem for a man running something he needed to stay hidden. Marcus had been on Derek Hollins's radar long before tonight. That changed things. He looked at Ava's drawing on the refrigerator, the house with the sun in every corner. Then he closed the legal pad, went to bed, and was up again at 5. He dropped Ava at school at 7:30. She was wearing her yellow raincoat and carrying Gerald the stuffed elephant in her backpack, which was technically against the no toys rule, but her teacher, Ms. Patterson, had quietly told Marcus 3 weeks ago that Gerald seemed to help Ava through transitions and to just not make it obvious. At the car door, Ava stopped and looked up at him with the expression she got when she was working something out. "Daddy, did something happen?" He looked at her. "Why?" "You made my sandwich with no crusts today. You always leave the crusts." He had absolutely left the crusts off without noticing. "Everything's fine, baby." She studied his face with those dark, serious eyes that had been making adults uncomfortable since she was 3 years old. Then she said, "Okay," in the tone that meant, "I don't fully believe you, but I'm choosing to trust you," and went through the school doors. Marcus sat in the parking lot for 2 full minutes before pulling out. He got to the building at 8:15, 45 minutes before his official shift, the way he always did. The security guard at the front desk, a retired veteran named Otis, who Marcus had shared 100 early morning silences with, looked up when he came through. "You look like you didn't sleep," Otis said. I slept fine. Your eyes say different. My eyes need to mind their business. Otis laughed and buzzed him through. Marcus walked to the maintenance bay, changed into his uniform, and stood at his workbench, looking at the day's work orders without reading them. He needed to get into the fourth-floor storage room without anyone knowing he'd been there. That was the problem. Not the access. He had a keycard for every mechanical and utility space in the building, including the climate-controlled server storage room on 4. The problem was that the fourth floor was Derek Hollins's floor, and Hollins had already made clear that he was tracking Marcus's movements up there. Any visit Marcus made that wasn't tied to a logged work order would be noticed. He needed a reason to be on 4. A legitimate, documented, completely unremarkable reason. He thought about the HVAC system. The secondary unit on 4, the one with the failed relay that Victoria had called him about weeks ago, had been repaired. But he'd noted at the time that the tertiary sensor array was reading slightly off. Not enough to flag as urgent. Enough to flag as something to monitor. He opened his laptop and pulled up the maintenance system. Found the original work order for the relay repair. Found his own notes in the comments field. Tertiary sensor array reading inconsistent. Recommend follow-up check within 30 days. He had written that 23 days ago. He logged a follow-up work order. Routine, documented. Entirely his own note recommending it. He set it for today mid-morning and submitted it through the standard system so it would show in facilities management's queue. Then he went and fixed 2 legitimate problems on the first floor and waited. At 10:45, he took the stairs to 4. The executive floor was busy in the particular way of places where expensive decisions get made. Phones, quick hallway conversations, the sound of a presentation being run in the conference room at the far end of the hall. Marcus walked through it with his toolbox and his logged work order on his tablet and his uniform, which was he had long ago understood the best invisibility technology ever invented. People in buildings like this did not see maintenance technicians. They saw a function. He went straight to the HVAC access panel near the server storage room. He opened the panel, took out his equipment, and began checking the tertiary sensor array. It actually did need calibration. He hadn't lied in his notes, and he worked on it methodically, one component at a time, his back to the hallway. The server storage room was 12 feet to his left. He had a keycard. He had a reason to be in the general area. What he did not have was a reason to open that specific door. Yeah. He needed someone to give him one. He was running the calibration sequence for the 3rd time when he heard footsteps stop behind him. Johnson. Not Derek Hollins. Younger voice. He turned and found Kevin Park, one of the junior IT technicians, holding a tablet and looking mildly stressed in the way that junior IT technicians at growing tech companies always looked mildly stressed. Hey Kevin, is the HVAC acting up again? Because we've been getting temperature fluctuation alerts on the storage room sensors all morning and Hollins is already on my case about it. Marcus kept his expression neutral. Temperature fluctuation on the storage room. Yeah, it's probably nothing, but we're supposed to log everything that touches the server environment. Marcus looked at the HVAC panel, then looked at Kevin. The tertiary array on this unit feeds directly into the storage room sensors. If it's been reading inconsistent, it could be throwing false alerts in there. He paused just long enough. I'd need to check the room-side sensor to confirm. Do you want me to log it or? Yes, Kevin said immediately, with the relief of a man who has just had his problem become someone else's documented problem. Yes, please log it. I'll sign off on the access. Kevin signed off on his tablet. Marcus used his keycard. The server storage room was cool and quiet, and hummed with the sound of systems doing their work in the dark. Marcus went to the room-side sensor panel on the wall near the door and opened it because the sensor panel was real and the calibration concern was real and he was going to address it. And while he was addressing it with his back to the door and his body angled so that the security camera in the upper right corner of the room saw exactly what it was supposed to see. A technician working on a sensor panel, he was also looking. Not obviously. Not with any movement that would register as anything other than a man doing his job. But Marcus had spent 2 years learning this building the way a blind man learns a room, and he knew how to gather information with everything except his eyes. The servers along the left wall were standard Pinnacle Tech infrastructure. He knew them. He'd been in this room before. The rack in the far right corner was not standard. It was newer. Different manufacturer, integrated into the room's systems in a way that looked seamless unless you knew exactly what the original installation had looked like, which Marcus did because he had been present for half of it. Someone had added hardware to this room. Recently. Discreetly. And had done a good enough job of making it look like it belonged that a casual observer, even a knowledgeable one, would likely miss it. Marcus finished calibrating the sensor, closed the panel, made his notes on his tablet. Every word he wrote was accurate. Every observation was logged. Except for one thing, which he did not write on his tablet and did not say out loud. In the 2 minutes he'd spent facing the sensor panel, he'd read the model number and serial prefix of the unauthorized rack unit from its reflection in the metal casing of the sensor housing. He had an excellent memory for numbers, always had. He left the storage room, thanked Kevin, went back to the HVAC panel and finished the calibration. Then he took the stairs back down, went to his bench, opened a personal notebook he kept in his locker, not the company system, his own notebook, the one that went home with him every night, and wrote down the model number and serial prefix before the sequence could blur in his memory. Then he called Ray from the parking lot on his lunch break. "I need you to look something up for me," Marcus said. "Manufacturer registry, hardware ID." Ray was quiet for a second. "Marcus, what are you into?" "I'm not into anything. I'm doing a job." "You're calling me from outside in the middle of the day to look up a hardware serial. That is not a nothing call." "Ray?" "Fine." The sound of Ray sitting down pulling up his laptop. "Give me the number." Marcus read it out. The sound of typing, then silence, then more typing. "Okay," Ray said slowly. "So this unit is registered to a company called Meridian Data Solutions, based in Delaware, incorporated 18 months ago." A pause. "Marcus, this company has 3 employees listed in the state filing and annual revenues that do not match the hardware they apparently purchased. Because it's a shell company." "Yeah." Ray's voice had gone careful the way it went when he understood that a situation was bigger than it had announced itself to be. "Who does it belong to?" "I don't know yet, but I have a theory." "Does your theory involve your CEO?" "It involves people she trusted." Silence on the line. "Marcus," Ray said, "I want you to think carefully about what you're doing." "I'm thinking carefully." "No, you're not. You're doing. There's a difference. You're a maintenance tech who found something in a server room that someone very deliberately hid. And whoever hid it has the power to make your life very difficult if they figure out you found it." "I know. Ava needs her father to still have a job next week." "Yeah." The words landed the way Ray had intended them to, not cruelly, but directly. Because Ray was the one person in Marcus's life who had earned the right to say the true thing without decoration. Marcus stood in the parking lot with the spring sun on the back of his neck and thought about Ava in her yellow raincoat and her stuffed elephant in her backpack and her eyes that saw everything. "Ava needs her father to be the kind of man worth looking up to," Marcus said. "That's a non-negotiable." Ray exhaled. "You're going to do this no matter what I say." "I'm going to do what's right." "Those are the same sentence for you. They've always been the same sentence." A pause. "Okay. What do you need from me?" "Keep looking at Meridian Data Solutions. Corporate filings, registered agent, any connected entities. Don't touch anything that requires credentials you don't have. Just public records." "I can do that." "And Ray, don't tell anyone." "Who am I going to tell Marcus?" Marcus hung up and went back inside. That evening after dinner, after the dishes, after Ava's bath, and her reading time, and the specific negotiation over how many more minutes before lights out, that had become its own nightly ritual. After all of it, Marcus sat on the edge of Ava's bed in the dark and listened to her breathe until he was sure she was asleep. Then he went to the kitchen table and his phone buzzed. Victoria. He picked up before the second buzz. "Did you find anything?" No greeting. Her voice was controlled but tight the way a wire gets when it's been pulled too far. "Yes." He kept his voice low. "There's hardware on the 4th floor that doesn't belong to Pinnacle Tech. It's registered to a shell company. 18 months old." Silence. "James," she said. Not a question. "The timing matches what you told me, but I need more before anyone can say a name." "How much more?" "The financial routing. You said there were transfers through a subsidiary. I need to know if Meridian Data Solutions appears in any of Pinnacle's vendor payments in the last 18 months. I can't pull that myself without someone in finance seeing the query." "Is there anyone in finance you trust completely?" And a long pause. "My executive assistant, Dana. She has read access to the vendor payment system because she manages my expense approvals. She's been with me since before Pinnacle existed." "Can you ask her to run a quiet search? Just a name lookup, Meridian Data Solutions. Tonight. If she's willing." Another pause. Then, "Marcus, I need you to understand something." Her voice shifted, still controlled, but carrying something underneath it that hadn't been there before. "If this goes where I think it goes, the people involved will fight back. They have resources and relationships, and they will use both. I don't want you to be the one who gets hurt because of what I dragged you into." "You didn't drag me," he said. "I offered." "I know, and I've been sitting here for the last hour thinking about whether I should have let you." "The answer is yes," Marcus said. "You should have, because someone should know what's in those walls, and right now I'm the only person who does." She was quiet for a moment. When she spoke again, her voice was different, quieter and honest in a way that her professional voice never quite was. "Why does it feel like I've known you longer than 2 years?" she asked. Marcus looked at the legal pad on the table. At the coffee cups he hadn't put away yet, because some part of him had apparently wanted to leave evidence of the previous night. "Probably," he said, "because you've been paying attention." A beat of silence that had a particular quality to it, the quality of two people in different rooms of a city that was dark and quiet, and full of things neither of them had said yet. "I'll call Dana," Victoria said. "Tomorrow morning first thing. I'll be on 4 by 10. Be careful." "I always am." He set his phone down and sat in the silence of the apartment and tried to identify what exactly was happening inside him, because something was, and it had been building since the moment he'd opened his door last night and found her standing there, soaked through, holding her keys like an anchor, looking at him like he was the only solid thing left. He was not a man who acted on feeling. He was a man who acted on evidence, on logic, on the structured and careful assessment of what was true and what could be proven. He had built his entire life on that foundation because feeling had led him to Danielle, and Danielle had walked out and left him alone with a 2-year-old and the rubble of a future he'd imagined. But there was something about Victoria Hayes that did not ask to be assessed. She arrived in his mind without invitation and without apology, the way certain truths do already there before you've decided to look for them. "Bache." He picked up the legal pad and wrote for a long time, not about the case, about what he knew about Derek Hollins, about what he remembered of every interaction he'd witnessed between Hollins and James Whitfield in 2 years of invisible presence in the building. The way Hollins always stepped back when Whitfield entered a room. The way Whitfield's name appeared on approved purchase orders that Marcus, thinking nothing of it at the time, had seen crossing the facilities manager's desk. Small things. Things a maintenance technician noticed because he was in the walls. Things that put together in the right order told a story. He wrote until midnight, went to bed, lay in the dark and listened to the city, and thought about a woman asking, what if that rainy night wasn't a coincidence, and a little girl who drew suns in every corner of every house she ever made. He did not think about quitting. He did not think about the resignation letter in pieces in the back of his desk drawer. He thought about Ava's voice, Daddy. Did something happen? And he thought, yes, baby. Something happened, and I think it was supposed to. The second day moved faster than the first. Ray called at 7 a.m. while Marcus was making Ava's breakfast crusts on the sandwich. This time back to normal, Ava noticed and said nothing but gave him a look that communicated clearly she had filed this as confirmation that things were better. Hey, Meridian Data Solutions, Ray said without preamble. Registered agent is a law firm in Wilmington, Delaware standard shell company setup. But the law firm has 3 other clients in their portfolio that I can find in public records. One of those clients is a holding company called Whitfield Capital Advisors. Marcus set down the spatula. James Whitfield, he said. I can't confirm it is the same Whitfield. It's a common enough name. But Marcus, the timing on the incorporation, the Delaware filing date, the hardware purchase timeline you gave me, it all lines up. Someone built this very carefully over 18 months, and they built it to be found only if you were looking in exactly the right place. Which no one would be, Marcus said, unless they spent 2 years learning the building from the inside. Yeah, Ray said quietly. Exactly that. Ava came into the kitchen in her socks, sliding the last 2 feet on the hardwood the way she always did, and looked at Marcus with the breakfast assessment that was also apparently a daily ritual. You made the crusts, she said. I made the crusts. She nodded, satisfied, and climbed into her chair. Marcus turned back to the stove and said to Ray, low and steady, Send me whatever you found. Public records only. I need it in writing. Already compiling it. You're a good man, Ray. I'm an idiot who loves you like a brother. Those are different things. Marcus almost laughed. The first time in 2 days. He dropped Ava at school and drove to work and went through the building's morning the way he always did, methodical, present, unremarkable. At 9:55, his phone buzzed with a message from a number he now recognized. Dana ran the search. Meridian appears in 14 vendor payment entries over 17 months. Total $2.3 million. Logged as infrastructure consulting. No deliverables on file. I'll have the full report by noon. Marcus read the message twice. Then he deleted it from his phone, the way Victoria had asked him to delete all their messages. Both of them careful. Both of them understanding that what they were building was not just a case, but a wall against the moment when someone decided to look at them instead of the people they were exposing. At 10 o'clock, he took the stairs to 4, and this time Kevin Park didn't need to wave him in. The follow-up calibration work order was still active, and Marcus had added a secondary note about monitoring the temperature differential on the storage room sensors over a 48-hour period, which gave him documented legitimate access to the room for the rest of the week. He went in, did his work, and while he did his work, he used his phone, angled away from the camera inside the open panel, housing a position he'd thought through carefully the night before, to photograph the hardware rack in the far right corner. Model number, serial prefix, cable routing, the way it interfaced with Pinnacle Tech's legitimate server infrastructure. He got 7 photographs. He came out of the room, finished his notes, and went back to his bench. At 12:30, his phone buzzed again. Not Victoria this time. Derek Hollins. Not a call. An in-person appearance at Marcus's workbench, which had never happened before in 2 years. Not once. Not in any context. Hollins walked into the maintenance bay with both hands in his pockets and looked around the space like he was appraising real estate he'd just decided to buy. Johnson. He stopped 3 feet from the workbench. Heard you've been up on 4 again. Routine follow-up, Marcus said. Logged work order. Sensor calibration. Right. Hollins rocked back on his heels. Funny timing, though. HVAC issues don't have timing preferences. Hollins's eyes moved to Marcus's toolbox, to the tablet on the bench, to Marcus's face. You and Ms. Hayes seem to have developed something of a rapport lately. The air in the room changed. Both junior techs had gone very still. Marcus held Hollins's gaze with the steadiness of a man who had been practicing steadiness his whole life. "She's the CEO. I work in the building." Hollins smiled with just his mouth. "Just making sure we're all clear on the nature of that relationship. You fix things, Johnson. That's a valuable skill. Let's make sure it stays in its lane." He left. The room was quiet for a full 5 seconds. Marcus picked up his tablet and went back to his work order.